captain with Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department. I've been there for 38 years, and I have 43 years in the fire service. Today is a special installment of Humpday Hangout. 50 years ago, October the 17th, 12 firefighters died in a catastrophic collapse at 23rd Street and Broadway in Manhattan, New York City. We have Captain Mike Dugan today, recently retired from the FDNY, and is going to give us an account of that disaster, which up until 911 was the worst disaster facing the FDNY. Again, 12 fatalities, and just about every rank was affected. But more than that, we want to hammer down why, amongst the panelists and amongst everybody viewing today, why that disaster is relevant today, as relevant today as it has ever been. And why that's not just a historic moment in FDNY history, something that happened 50 years ago. Why that same type of disaster or a similar disaster caused by a building renovation could kill just as many firefighters today. So what we're going to look at is how building renovations, maybe moving a wall, moving a column, sealing off a wall, putting a hole in a wall that isn't adequately shored, can affect a firefighter in Las Vegas, Nevada, Oakland, California, Florissant, Missouri, Wichita, Kansas, or Miami, Florida. So before we make the introductions, I want to thank our sponsor, Key. That's keyhose.com. Yesterday, if you tuned in, I had the privilege and opportunity to walk through their plant, actually see how they make their top-of-the-line combat-ready hose. It's very interesting. There's no delamination issue where the lining of that hose will ever detach from an inner jacket because it's really one and the same. It's a through-the-weave type of extrusion. It's basically one in the same. And then that is covered by an outer jacket for greater heat and abrasion resistance. Is combat ready cheap? No, it is not. But as I say on every one of these installments, don't go cheap on hose, bro. And was hammered down yesterday by many of our participants, and the three gentlemen from Key, is that hose is part of a system that begins at the pump and ends at the nozzle. And everything has to be by design. You just can't throw things together helter-skelter. So it's an easy endorsement for me because I've been to the factory. I have my hands on Key hose every shift. It's the hose that my company uses. It's the hose that my department uses, and it's the hose that the FDNY uses. So it's been put to the test, and it passes the test every time. So thank you, Key. And again, we're going to focus on the 23rd Street collapse, but with the intent of hammering it down to everybody why that incident is relevant today. Something like that in terms of a building renovation could occur anywhere in this country. So with having said that, Captain Mike, if you'd introduce yourself, and then after that, it'll be Jason.
Yes, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Mike Dugan. I was a captain in the New York City Fire Department, and I retired a couple of years ago, and I did 27 years in the FDNY, and I am honored to be here today to talk about the 23rd Street fire.
All right, thanks, Captain Mike. We're looking forward to it. And Jason?
Hey, hello. To everybody, and privileged and humbled to be able to be a part of the panel. I'm a battalion chief with the Florissant Valley Fire Protection District in North St. Louis County, and I'm looking for a really good and relevant discussion today.
Okay, did we get Sam Hiddle on yet? Sam from Wichita, Kansas. Okay, it looks like he's going to be on sometime today. Sam Hiddle from Wichita, Kansas will be on with us, and then Daryl. Brief introduction.
Hi, Daryl Liggins. I'm a captain with the Oakland, California Fire Department. This is my 23rd year in the fire service. I started in a suburb just south of San Francisco, and now a proud member of the Oakland Fire Department. And it'll be a good discussion today.
Clark, you make a little introduction.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everybody. Clark Lamping, Clark County Fire Department here in Las Vegas. Fire Station 11, right on Las Vegas Boulevard. I'm looking forward to this discussion today. Before we start, I'd like to say a couple things. I don't know if you guys can see it out there, but I am wearing my Clark County Fire Department official breast cancer awareness t-shirt. Every year, Clark County Firefighters Local 1908, we donate about $10,000 to the Susan G. Komen Foundation. So we're all in our pink. I don't usually wear pink, but I'm in touch with my feminine side today, so that's why I'm wearing this in pink. And also North Las Vegas Fire Department. It's a neighboring fire department. We share a border with Clark County Fire Department. Last week, they lost a fire captain, Captain Yafet Miller. He was a 21-year veteran of the North Las Vegas Fire Department. They had a big 3-alarm fire. He was on that fire. He came home afterwards. He laid down and had some kind of a massive heart attack. They determined he was brain dead. They pulled the plug on him, so Captain Yafet Miller died in the line of duty. They gave him a line of duty death. We will be burying Captain Miller tomorrow, full service funeral. And I just want to shout out to any North Las Vegas Fire Department brothers or sisters that are out there watching this. Our thoughts and our prayers with your department and the Miller family.
All right, and since we met last month, we lost 2 brothers in a building collapse in Wilmington, Delaware. And we don't know what caused that, precipitated that collapse. But I have to tell you, I want to know. We all want to know. We all need to know. Now, I have no way of knowing if that was a building renovation, but it'll be interesting to find out. And also, quite tragically, we lost a rising star in the fire service on the FDNY, a young man that was going up through the ranks very rapidly in an explosion. Mike, if you could just for a few minutes explain what the heck happened there.
Yeah, Chief Fahey was promoted posthumously to deputy chief. This guy was an attorney and wanted to follow in his father's footsteps and became a fireman. Had reached the rank of battalion chief after 17 years of service, which is pretty unique in the FDNY, and was on the deputy chief's list. There was an explosion in an illegal grow house, and they were using generators because of keeping the electricity off the grid. And they had illegal propane tanks running generators, and also when they produce the CO2, the carbon dioxide, it helps the plants grow. I did not know this, but they were capturing the vapors and everything else. Well, they got a report of a gas leak, and Chief Fahey was there and taking care of all of the members and directing the operation when the building exploded. And we don't know what caused it yet. But when the building exploded, Chief Fahey was hit in the upper body with a chunk of the roof that came down, and it hit him in the head and the shoulder area. And he did not survive. But the type of guy he was and the type of person he was, his wife has decided that she doesn't need all the money that was raised for them. The Siller Tunnel to Towers offered to pay off their mortgage, and she said no. Pay off a service person's mortgage. Work and build things for injured servicemen. And that, to me, is service and selfless service. And this woman has cemented her husband's legacy of service, not only to the city, but to the world, to humanity. And I just, it's amazing. It's crazy. Also this week, we lost a retired captain, Vinny Ungaro, who I knew very well, of 9/11 cancer. And for those of us who do a lot of training, our friend Ricky Tenengretta, who used to teach with John Salka, was on his motorcycle and T-boned. And he could use some prayers also, because he's going to have a long road ahead of him.
You know, Mike, I know we've mentioned this before on these Hangouts. 343 brothers is a drop in the bucket, is a pittance compared to the long-term effects. At the end of the day, how many firefighters will have been afflicted by some type of cancer directly caused from working that at ground zero for weeks and months. It's similar in not to the effect or not to the extent, but the telephone exchange fire in the early 70s. How many firefighters have succumbed to cancer as a result of the polyvinyl chloride insulation on those wires? And it's incredible. So if you could take us back 50 years, Mike, I was in the 7th grade. My dad was very upset at the time. He was a lieutenant on the Chicago Fire Department, and I think we discussed this once in a radio show. I couldn't understand why my dad was so upset for something that happened in New York City. He didn't know those firefighters, but I didn't understand the brotherhood of firefighters at the time. I now know that every time one of our brothers or sisters are seriously injured or killed in this job, it affects us as well, because we are such a brotherhood and sisterhood. So if you could take us back, Mike, a little bit and give us some background into what happened at 23rd Street and Broadway on October the 17th, 1966.
1966, October 23rd, was a fire in the basement of a building on Broadway and 23rd Street. And the building had been illegally renovated numerous times. And they had a fire in the building, and they were having a difficult time finding where the fire was. And it turns out that they had put a terrazzo floor over the old wooden floor. And for those of you who don't understand terrazzo, it's polished, it's marble chips and cement, and they polish it to they're beautiful floors. But because the fire was really someplace else and was burning underneath them, and the place that was used, it used to do, it did framing and artwork, and they sprayed lacquer on paintings to protect them in reusable picture frames. So they would stretch it out in a picture frame and stretch the work out on the canvas and then spray the lacquer on it and then put it in a finished frame. But you have to think of all of the dust that was there, all of the dust, all of the lacquer and everything else. So this fire was going in a basement. And they're in this building trying to figure this out. Now, again, this was long before thermal imaging cameras or anything else, and they can't find the seat of the fire. They've got the heat burning up through the terrazzo. The terrazzo's getting warm. They think they're in the right place. They don't even realize where it is. The wood supports that supported the floor gave way, and the floor went.
I think it's important, Mike. Those wood supports were 3x12s.
3x12. True. Massive. True 3x12s.
Yes.
Massive supports. Yes. And they finally burnt away after a period of time. The New York City Fire Department lost members in every rank but one. Captain was the only rank unaffected at this fire. We lost a deputy chief. We lost a battalion chief. We lost 2 lieutenants. And we lost 8 firefighters, from a senior firefighter down to a brand new probationary firefighter that had months on the job. I remember as a probie looking at the picture of the 12 men at 23rd Street Fire, as it's known in the New York City, and figuring out how many children were orphaned by that fire. Orphaned by that fire, there were 37 children, if I'm not mistaken, and I can't remember if I'm 100% correct, but it was in that number, children that were orphaned at this fire. It's amazing how the world goes. I worked up in Harlem with a guy by the name of Tommy Dukes Donovan. His brother, John Donovan, was the only survivor of Engine 18 because he was ordered to write summonses that day. He went out on hydrant summons duty. They used to send people out to write summonses to keep people off the fire hydrants in Manhattan. So he was walking around, came back, found out they were at an alarm, and went to the alarm and barely survived himself. But he was the only member of Engine 18 to survive. Vinny Dunn, who was one of my friends and mentors and a great, great individual, was a lieutenant at 33 Engine at the time and was ordered with two engines, 18 and 33. They pulled up and the chief looked at the officer of 18 Engine and said, get in that store, and said to Vinny, I want you in the exposure. If he had just reversed the orders, one of the godfathers, the people protecting firefighters, Vinny Dunn, wouldn't be with us. And the bottom line on all of this is that it was a renovated building. Now, I can tell you other things that have happened since then in renovated buildings. We can go to the Atlantic Avenue fire, where we lost Scott LaPedra. We lost a couple of other brothers there. Guys were trapped in that building. We can go to the up in the Bronx to the dollar store where Howie Carplunk and Michael Riley passed away. Renovations kill firefighters. And what we have to realize is going out and spending time out of the firehouse to observe the buildings in your neighborhood and what's going on, especially if you see work going on in the building. You should get off the rig, get in there and see what they're doing. So you know, because if you document it, whether it's through the mobile data terminal, the MDT, through a dispatch service that's address-based or whatever else, you might not be saving your life, but in 5 or 10 years, when you're working someplace else, you're saving a brother or sister firefighter's life. And for a lot of us, our children follow us into the fire service. You might be saving your own sons or daughters' lives down the road in 15 to 20 years.
You know, Mike, I think it was Brannigan that said, if you see a construction dumpster in front of a building, be highly suspicious. What I'd like to do now is, I'm beginning with myself. I'm going to relate a couple of building renovations that have been detrimental to me and my job, which are, there seems to be a pattern of it, most of them illegal. And then I'm going to ask the rest of the panelists to relate some of their building renovations. It may not be a basement issue, but it could be something else just as deadly. What I find is we have these type 2 non-combustible, either concrete block, steel skeleton, or tilt-up wall warehouses. And they basically build wood frame shacks inside of them. Wood frame, sometimes 2-story buildings inside of these concrete warehouses. And the bays are usually 2,500 square feet and not 1 square foot more, because if they went to 2,600 square foot, they'd have to be sprinklered. So they keep it right at 2,500 square foot until the tenant wants to expand the business, rents the adjoining bay, and breaks through the 2-hour concrete block firewall into the next occupancy. Now, the hazard here is, did he have an engineering study made of how they are going to distribute the vertical load that's going to have to be spread across that opening, usually with a lintel, and then with columns on either side? Did an engineer do that, or did they just come up with something? And in some cases, I've actually seen it where there's nothing to hold that concrete block up. There's no lintel, there's no column, there's nothing. It's a firefighter killer. You think you have a fire in one separate occupancy, and man, you don't. Even though you got a parapet wall up over the roof, you never can take that for granted. The other one we get is, you got smoke coming out of the front of a house. You enter the front of the house, stretch a line in, and bam, you hit a wall. What happened? Well, they divided the house off and turned the back of the house into a separate occupancy. Mike, you were mentioning that they had difficulty locating that fire on 23rd Street. You know, I listen to the tactical frequency as soon as I hear that our companies are having a fire anywhere in the county. And you can always tell when the incident time is 20 minutes and they still haven't located the fire. You know this is not going to have a good outcome, because that fire is growing somewhere in a concealed, inaccessible space. So I just X'd myself out. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you.
Okay. Okay, good. Here, I'm back up. So what we'll do now is, okay, am I back on now?
Yes.
Okay, you can see me. Okay, join. Okay, you already take me there. Okay. All right, good. Dan Shaw, Murphy's Law, stuck on an incident again and picked out a special wig for the event. Okay. Where we were hoping he would dress up like, I was hoping Nicki Minaj. I think that I would like to see Dan Shaw dressed up in a long Nicki Minaj blonde wig. And I think that would be quite a crowd pleaser. So anyway, that's some of my, just right off the top of my head, some of my experiences with renovations. Mr. Hovelman, sir, could you relate some of your renovations that have been detrimental to you and your department?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity of being fire prevention at Sullivan in my volunteer department, and it's been an eye opener for me, because a lot of times the renovations permit those things. They don't come to you and tell you they're doing them, and you don't find them until it's too late. And one in particular, we've got an old hotel that they've turned into basically apartments, and a lot of void spaces, a lot of walls in front of windows, reconfiguring the interior dynamics of the apartments. And a lot of them have got these chases behind them because they back up to each other. And they've sealed those off and actually broke into some of those, increased the size of those rooms. So what we had, and just single, what you'd go to a hotel, is now turned into maybe 2 or 3. The outside, it still look the same, and it can get real confusing. Another thing we see a lot of around here is old dilapidated buildings on the cheap going in, and they're designed for a certain type of occupancy most of the time, building construction materials, if there's any protection systems in them. And after 2008, our area, we had a lot of decline of property values. A lot of them are set for that long. Years, we've seen an increase in the amount of those things being purchased, but being used in ways you never dreamed of. And a lot of times they'll buy them, let them sit for a little while, and then do the changes kind of when it looks like they're doing nothing to them. The other things we've seen are some of the old strip malls with basements get sealed up. They completely seal up the floor because they're wet, damp, they're not using them anymore. Still utility down there. But to make more floor space, they'll just seal up the stairs going down into those old strip mall buildings. So those are some things we've noticed getting out and about into some of our areas.
You make a very important point. Mike, I'm going to come back to you. Oh, I hear the big ones coming in. Mike Dugan, could you tell us a little bit about how they expanded the basement of the art studio on 22nd Street up into and under the Wonder Drug Store on 23rd Street? Was that a factor?
That was a huge factor because, again, you're going to the back of a store and you're feeling the heat and you're looking for the fire. Normally, you think that the store and the basement underneath it are going to follow the same footprint, so to speak. They took the wall of the building out and opened it up underneath the art dealers. So now they were on a floor where the art dealer had all of their stuff stored in that place underneath it. The basement was where they did all the work, and the guys in the store and in the drugstore and in the original store are looking. The guys in the basement are saying, "No, there's something wrong. We can't. There's no fire down here. We can't find it." So again, for all of us, hindsight is 20/20. But how many times have you been looking for a fire? And it's happened to me where you've gone someplace because the people saw smoke. And you went to one wing of the building, and the next thing you know, you realize you get up there, the fire is not in your wing of the building. It's in the opposite wing of the building.
I hear you. I hear you. We were just joined by another panelist here, the esteemed, Sam Hiddle from Wichita, Kansas, the heartland of America. Is either his head is screwed on backwards or his hat is backwards. What's going on there? You got a sweatband on? What's going on there?
I gotta go, Captain. I'll be back.
All right. Remember, break every window out of the place. All right. Do us proud. I always say that. I say that, and I can just hear somebody tuning in right at the minute that I say that and taking it out of context. All right. He's got to go. All right. I bet you it's a medical call. Yeah. Better him than me. All right. Mr. Liggins, sir.
How are you doing?
Your experiences with renovated buildings in the Bay Area.
I was just thinking maybe I should have a button on my desk, so if there's a question you ask I don't like, I could hit it and make it sound like I'm going on a run. But then I'd have to wear my uniform when I'm off duty. Well, renovations are a problem for everybody, and when I think of two things. One is recognizing that there have been renovations made, and that means we have to have firefighters that understand how buildings are constructed and how they're deconstructed, and how those construction features can pose a hazard to us. If they're not recognized, then there's nothing we can really do to help ourselves. We go into commercial buildings like most fire departments for commercial inspections. We check for fire hazards and extinguishers and exits and things like that. But we also should be looking beyond just the things on the form and looking at these construction features and renovations and seeing what we can recognize. The other thing I think of is, how do we pass this information on to the crews? I know FDNY has a wonderful systems. You call it the SIDS information, I think, Mr. Dugan?
Critical Information Dispatch System, SIDS, is the acronym.
Yeah,
So,
and we're lacking that. So crews en route to a building, if crews have been in the building before, can enter some information, whether it has to do with staircases, renovations, previous fires, maybe basements are shared among multiple businesses. That information could be relayed to the crews, the chief, additional alarm companies, and most of the Bay Area, I'm not aware of having information like that, and I think that would be great. The other thing is, and I said two things, but I'll add a third, is we can't inspect our residential homes officially, but we do go in and out of them all the time on medical calls. We see more residential buildings than any other occupation, I think, going in and out of them. So we should take a poke around when we can, looking at some of the building features, especially in your first due, and see what's going on. In the Bay Area directly, in the city of Stockton, I have some notes here. They lost two firefighters. They were on a street where a woman had made a dance studio inside of her home and made some renovations that didn't support that floor as well as it should have, especially under fire conditions. Two firefighters were killed in that fire, one of which was his very first structure fire, when the second floor came crashing down onto the first floor. I think I don't work in Stockton, but talking to friends there, if you looked at the neighborhood, you would notice that this house had what some refer to as a pop top. There's a second floor added up there, but you don't know what it's for, if it's for a bedroom or a living room or just making your home larger. But it should definitely be a warning sign of that there's been some renovations to this residential home. And then just north of us, we had two other firefighters killed in Contra Costa County back in 2007 when a rain roof was added over a flat roof. If you see a neighborhood of flat roofs and then you see a couple of peaked roofs, that can pose a real problem for you, because that roof, they didn't remove the old roof. You still have a substantially built flat roof maybe tongue and groove material, maybe still tar and gravel on there. And just for aesthetics and for rain, they will put a peak roof over it, and it can appear that your fire is out, that you've checked for extension in the ceiling, you don't see anything, and you have fire between that flat roof and that peaked roof. And the truck members can't punch that down. It can be very difficult to access. So now that fire department did add that to their dispatch system. When crews notice that there was a rain roof put over a flat roof, they can have that notification now.
This is this did have the original peak roof is still there. It doesn't have anywhere near the pitch that this one does. But if you're exactly what would happen here, Daryl, is that you would pull ceiling and you'd see the underside of the roof and think that you've got the fire, and it respond to command that you've got the underside of the fire. You don't have any more fire in the attic, when in fact there's another space up above you. Anytime an addition is added to a house, how do they join the two roof lines? Can you see that okay, fellas?
There's a little bit of reflection.
Okay, how about here? What we're looking at is asphalt shingles with the addition roof up over and above. The asphalt shingles is the original roof. On the 4th of July, not this last year, but 2 years ago, we were sent in to examine for vertical extension in the attic, which is very small, it looked to me, in this old one-story, it looked to be one-story, wood stucco on wood frame building. We used the gasoline-powered pipe pole that would be a carbide tip chainsaw to open up that tongue and groove ceiling, because it would have been a bear to pull. You can see some of the chicken wire they were using as a substrate for the plaster. Now, I advised the chief, we really don't have much of an attic here at all. I'm just looking at the underside of the roof decking. Well, I still got heavy smoke coming from the roof. Well, this is what I didn't know. This is what I didn't know. I'm looking here. That's the underside of what I'm seeing. That's the other roof. You see that, fellas?
Yep.
Okay. So, having said that, yes, renovations can fool us, and they can create, as Daryl, as you said so accurately, a very dangerous concealed space which can allow fire to roar over our heads underneath us, and also is a reservoir for flammable and sometimes explosive fire gases. If you're a student of the fire service, if you look back in the early 90s or late 80s, Oklahoma City had a roof over of an addition after addition. They killed, seriously burnt to death, 2 or 3 firefighters in Oklahoma City after they thought they had knocked down the fire. The culprit was, in my understanding, was a roof overlap that was a reservoir for carbon monoxide gas. Commander Lamping, can you relate some of the building renovations in the Las Vegas area that have been problematic to you?
Yes, sir. In Las Vegas, fortunately, our economy has recovered from the recession, and our economy is booming in Las Vegas. Both residential and commercial construction is going crazy. Now, I work right on Las Vegas Boulevard, and if you've ever visited Las Vegas, you know all the hotels and the convention centers right on Las Vegas Boulevard. Well, west of Las Vegas Boulevard is the whole support system for all of the hotels and convention centers. So I have an enormous commercial warehouse area loaded with building materials for construction projects, loaded with supplies they have for conventions in there. So I've got these huge 100,000 square foot warehouses, rows and rows and rows of these to support the Las Vegas Strip. And just like Captain Gustin said, these businesses, they outgrow the warehouse they're in, so they simply buy the warehouse next to it and breach the wall and move into that. So I've got multiple violations like that going on in my first in, and there's almost too much of this business going on to even accurately log it all. Every single time I drive up and down these streets, I'm seeing these construction trailers out there working, renovating, things like that. And in addition to the actual construction, what they're loading these buildings with they're going to overwhelm the sprinkler system. And, we should have Kyle Smith on this talk when he's designing the sprinkler systems. But what they're packing these buildings with, the material is so great, the quantity is so enormous that it's an enormous fire load. Just 2 days ago, I was in a warehouse, and this warehouse was being used to store carpet for the convention. So every time you walk into a convention, I don't know if you realize it, the whole floor is carpeted. Every time that convention switches out, they roll up all of that carpet and bring in new carpet and just roll it down and tape it down to whatever the purchaser wants, whatever kind of carpet they want. So they store this carpet. We walk into this warehouse, and it's a concrete tilt-up with a panelized roof. The panelized roof had columns supporting the main beams, and these columns were right in the middle of the warehouse. We had 500 full rolls of carpet inside this warehouse that were being held in place between two columns. In addition to all the rack storage with thousands of rolls of carpet, can you picture 2 columns inside of a warehouse, and in between those columns, 500 full rolls of carpet leaning against those, and that's how they're storing this carpet. So we immediately called fire prevention. We immediately had inspectors out there to look at this. Anything happens at all to those structures, those columns are coming down and that roof is coming down on top of it. I don't know what 500 rolls of carpet weighs. Add some sprinklers to it, so get it wet. That's a phenomenal load in there. So it's not only the construction and the renovations we have to worry about, it is the changing of the stock and the changing of the supplies they have inside those structures as well.
And you're not going to find that out by sitting in your recliner and watching Jerry Springer in the afternoon. That's just not going to happen. And like I say, a lot of times it's not a formalized pre-fire planning. You're getting out in these buildings, like Daryl said, on medical runs. Our friend here, Sam Hiddle from Wichita, Kansas. You joined us late, Sam, and I'm going to need a note from your mommy why you did join us late, and then I'm going to probably have to give you a spanking, okay? Because you did show up late, Sam. What do you got on your head first? Is this? Oh, it's a Yamaha.
Yeah,
okay, it's a Yamaha. Oh, I see. Okay, it's not.
That's for Captain Dugan.
Okay, very good. Now, we're going to shout out the key hose here right after I talk to our friend Sam Hiddle and find out what he has to say. Sam, you joined us late, but we're talking about the 23rd Street collapse, 50th anniversary. And what do you encounter in Wichita, Kansas in terms of building renovations which are dangerous and detrimental to you and your department?
I would say what I refer to as like a modern terrazzo, which kind of ties into that. We're putting up 4 or 5 story wood frame apartment and hotels, and we're running TGIs to support the floor systems and the roof systems in these. And on the floors in between, they're actually getting about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of like a lightweight plaster.
Yeah.
So particularly if you get into like that pedestal style construction, where you're getting
first couple of floors are masonry.
What's that?
Well, the first couple of floors are masonry, and then they can go 4 stories wood frame.
Exactly. And so now you walk in and you've got those wide jambs that we tell guys, look at the windows, look at the jambs when you go in, and it should give you an idea of how thick the walls are. You go up about 3 or 4 floors and you go to sound it, and it sounds like concrete. And so without walking around and realizing that you're actually on TGIs, you could get yourself in trouble.
Okay, Sam, now TGI being your eye joist, which is
correct.
Usually,
your wooden
2x3 upper and lower chord, and it's notched in a web member of usually OSB, oriented strand board. Oh, you're going to go again? Is this your excuse this time?
Somebody else.
Okay, now Sam, is this done? Is this permitted? In other words, are we exceeding the design load of the TGIs?
No, we're not. Engineered wise, they're beautiful systems. In fact, even in residential, builders will tell people, if you want something that's going to stay straight,
yes,
and you want something that can carry a heavy load, if you have a grand piano, then we need to run TGIs over your living room. If you have a tile floor and you want it to stay straight, you need to run TGIs. from an engineered standpoint, they're fantastic. From a thermal degradation and collapse potential, they're horrible.
They are marvels of modern engineering, Sam. I cannot disagree. They can span further than a dimensional 2x10, 2x12, which has a maximum theoretical span of around 25 feet. They carry a tremendous load. They're also very quiet. But it's the fire performance. Everything else about them is positive, but the fire performance. And we're never going to be able to sprinkler, public educate, or prevent fires into extinctions. I would be remiss if we don't mention our sponsor, Key Hose. That's keyhose.com. I had the pleasure and the honor of being in their plant yesterday and got our understanding of how they put together their hose. And it's not just their combat ready, which is the top of the line, but they have, I think, about 7 different grades of attack hose. And they also have supply hose as well, 4 and 5 inch diameter. They make hose for other countries as well, as we saw yesterday. It's all made in the USA. Remember 4 criteria for hose. Flow capability. In other words, the minimum friction loss, the maximum flow. The abrasion resistance, heat resistance, kink resistance. When you compare Key Hose against those 4 criteria, I don't think you're going to find a better hose on the market. So a big shout out to Key Hose. Also, I want to shout out to Joe Pernesti, our brother from Ohio. And Joe writes for the magazine and writes for the web. And this was actually Joe's inspiration. He contacted us, and we do listen to you folks that are watching us. And he suggested that we examine the 23rd Street collapse. We were blessed to have Mike Dugan with us. But Joe, we heard you, and this is why we changed the program today. I'm going to digress just for a moment here. I want to give a shout out to a chief that just retired from the Martin County Fire Rescue Department, Scott Legg. We were going to talk about attic fires, and specifically in McMansions. The man just retired. I don't want to run out of time before I give this guy a shout out, because this is a great event. What I think is just admirable in my mind as one heck of a fire that these guys had. This is a McMansion. Can you see it fairly well? Okay. Somehow I hope we improve the technology one of these days. Lightning strike, and classic for a lightning strike, multiple points of origin. I think it's about a 5,500 square foot house with several converging roof lines where it's difficult to be able to attack all of the fire from one spot. He had his guys get in there and very aggressively, very meticulously go up in this voluminous attic in different levels, different parts. There were several points of origin, as I said, and he had his guys aggressively go after it. I do believe there was some roof ventilation where they had to remove some of the roof tiles. I'm not absolutely sure on that. But at the end of the day, the homeowner was absolutely jubilant because it was abundantly clear that the Martin County Fire Rescue Department saved his house. And I think this speaks of something else about Chief Legg and chiefs like him. It has to do with leadership, because these guys work themselves past the point of exhaustion. You know how labor intensive it is to go after a huge attic fire. What drives firefighters to go that extra mile? It's a chief that inspires and incentivizes and encourages and coaches his people. You want a leader that your people follow you out of fear of letting you down, not out of fear of discipline that you may inflict on them, but out of fear of letting them down. I remember working for a chief like that on my department. And man, we would do anything for that guy because he was such a motivator and he developed such a team spirit and esprit de corps. So shout out to Chief Scott Legg. recently retired from Martin County Fire Rescue. Heck of a fire in the attic of a McMansion. At another date, we're going to come back, have some other guests on, and discuss fires in McMansion specifically. But I didn't want to run out of time before I gave him a shout out. Mike, any other thoughts on can we talk a little bit, Mike, about SROs, single room occupancies? And I know that was a big factor in the Black Sunday fire. Where the fellows had to, am I correct on that? Where they had to jump out of the fourth floor windows because of a single room occupancy.
And it's not even a single room occupancy. That's a little, but what it turns out to be is people in New York City, because of the rent prices, how much they're getting for apartments, they break apartments up into little spaces. They're smaller than college dorm rooms. And they rent out a space to each person. And what happens is they don't take into account where the fire escape is, the secondary means of egress. They do this in non-fireproof buildings, and they just put up walls. They now sell, you can buy them almost like the partitions you will see in office spaces for apartment buildings. And they're almost like accordion. They will go floor to ceiling. So you can, sleep if somebody snores or whatever else. You can have your own space, and they break the living room into 3 sleeping areas for different tenants, so they can pay the rent. My daughter had a friend going to school in Manhattan, and I went to see the place she was living in, and I said to her, "You better go buy a smoke detector, for your space." Because there's none here. And you have to be aware of this. There are places throughout New York City where they're breaking things up. And this happens in every town, every village, every county in the United States of America, where there are people, single moms, single dads, raising their kids, can't afford their mortgage on their own. So they're going to throw up a wall and move somebody else in. They're going to break up the house and make 2 different floors. They're going to break up the apartment and invite somebody else to live in there, share common space, kitchens, and everything else. It happens everywhere.
It's huge in areas that have a large immigrant population, such as Miami. There's neighborhoods in Miami where every garage in that neighborhood has been renovated into at least 1 apartment, if not 2. And the same thing with second floors. There's neighborhoods. I know that I've seen it up in the Chicago area where there will be fire showing from a second floor window. Firefighters enter the front door, take the stairs to the second floor, and hit their head on plywood because they've floored over the stairway. They've sealed it off. And they put a makeshift stairway in the back. The second floor, which was part of a 1-family home, has now been renovated into 1 or more single-room occupancies. Again, off-campus housing is another firefighter killer. And again, the large immigrant population, which we're seeing all over the country. Jason, you want to weigh in on that a little bit, brother? Jason Hovelman?
On the broken up to the houses and things, we've got a lot of basements in our area that there'll be 3 separate living units in a 2,000 square foot house basement and just 1 exit. And a lot of them, we have mostly older homes. We've got some of the newer walkout basements that you see with most of the newer homes, but the large majority of our homes are older, and most of them are walk out or walk up basements. I'm sorry. And some of them don't have exterior access at all, but they'll block that walk up access to put the 3 different living areas down there. And there's just 1 way down. And we had a fire recently in a basement where they had to go down the stairs, and it was so broke up. They had to get through 3 different bedrooms to get to the bedroom that was on fire. No windows, no access, nothing down there. And you have no way of knowing what they're doing in these private homes. And there'll be 2 or 3 families living in there. And it's been real epidemic. And the other thing I wanted to talk about that I'd forgotten about real quick, if you'd let me, but we talk about the construction on the inside and how it affects fire service suppression and surge activities and things like that, and the degradation of materials. But so about 5 or 6 years ago, I was driving through a city in our state, and it was, I think, about an 8-story high-rise building. And they had put, and I don't know specifically what kind of building it was, but there were several windows on each floor. And I'll try and get a picture sent to all of you later on, and maybe Bill or Shannon can put it up later. But they put like a metal screen over the one side of the building that faced the highway that had, somebody must have donated a lot of money to that building, and it was their name. It must have been associated with a school, and it was some kind of arts building. And it left about a 3-foot space between that metal screen and the windows of that building. And it was from the bottom to the top. You would never get a ladder truck to any of those windows. You'd never get a ground ladder to any of those windows. And I asked some people that worked in the city about that, and they could give me a good answer how they got away with that. But if you had victims hanging out of a window on a building like that, you'd never be able to get to them.
Sam Hiddle, can you share with our viewers some of the signs that you would notice on a 360 that could give indication that you are dealing with a home that was originally built for one family and now houses more than one? Some of the things that you would be looking for on a 360.
Some of the things I'd be looking for is multiple window units. That's going to be a tell. A lot of extra dish satellites. You got to be careful. Granted, if somebody gets dish and then they move services and go to AT&T or something like that, or a dish breaks, and they can have multiple dishes, that doesn't necessarily reflect that it's an SRO, but it's still something that grabs our attention. You're usually going to see more than one exterior staircase, and a lot of them are going to be they're going to be wood. They're not going to be nice. People are doing these on the cheap. They're not going to be to code usually. Just the neighborhood alone, like you said, when you get around colleges, you're going to see a lot of this. And the other thing I would just warn people about is we typically tell people, look at meters, gas meters, look at electrical meters to determine if it's a multiple occupancy. But what we see a lot of times in our SROs is it's an all-inclusive. They don't want to pull a permit and have each apartment wired legally. So they keep one meter, one gas meter, one electrical meter on the house, and they just divide those bills up evenly amongst all the occupants.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And I see that in Miami as well. That used to be a dead giveaway that you had 2 electric meters, 2 mailboxes, 2 gas meters, negative. That is, you could very well have multiple occupancies with only 1 mailbox, 1 electric meter, 1 gas meter. Yes, excellent point, Sam. Daryl, any other thoughts on renovations? Homes that have been built for one family and now house more than one?
Yeah, I mean, for the town I'm working in, a lot of the homes were very large back in the day. Mostly, some call them Queen Anne's, we call them Victorians, and almost none of those are just one family in there anymore. I'd be more surprised if there was just one family than multiple families. But a lot of the times when it's broken up into more than one unit, we'll have 2 doors in the front of the building. That's very common. We'll have one on the side, and sometimes just a rear staircase built to access one in the rear. Most of the time our hose line's going in the front of the building, and sometimes for those occupancies, particularly on the top floor, there'll be a rear staircase built, wood frame staircase that we'll have to access to get a line up there. And even worse than breaking it up into different occupancies, we'll sometimes enter a house where it is broken up, where they've taken every room in the house and put these storm doors on there, the metal doors, like security doors, where you can still get some ventilation, but little security, and have a hasp and padlocks on those doors throughout each room of the house. I mean, it would be very difficult to get a hose stream with fire venting out of one of those you almost have to go into an adjoining room and breach a wall. Forcible entry could be very difficult. But that led me to ask Mr. Dugan a question. On your SIDS information, can you guys put in information on private dwellings, or is that limited to commercial occupancies? If you had a space, as I'm describing, with these interior doors, with metal doors on there, would you be able to put that in a SIDS card?
Absolutely. Our SIDS is based on the address. And the SIDS it's the critical information dispatch. And I like to tell a story. A good friend of mine was a battalion chief up in Harlem and pulled up to a vacant building. And there was a sidewalk shed around the building. And he didn't know the address. And he walked around and he picked up the address of the building. And he gave the address to the dispatcher. The dispatcher pulled up the SIDS and said, "Chief, it says here the interior is really bad. No one should be in the building." And my friend John said, "Oh, okay." Ordered everybody out of the building. Drop your hoses, get out of the building. They were out of the building about 45 seconds when the whole interior pancaked down. And it saved the firemen's lives because it's based on the address. You're not doing anything, for a private dwelling versus commercial. You're just putting it in the system. So as soon as they get the address. So a lot of times if we get a call across from 2 Main Street, there's a fire. You pull up and it's 1 Main Street. You tell the dispatcher, "We're operating at 1 Main Street." And they will pull up the SIDS information. The other thing that they do is they say that the SIDS information is available upon request. We've told every officer, request the SIDS information. The dispatcher reads it over the air. So everybody on the rig gets to hear what's going on at the building. So if it impacts the roof firefighter, if it impacts the OV on the outside of the building, they all know what's going on.
That's great. Who puts that in? Who requests or inputs that information into the CAD?
It goes to a SIDS desk. The company officer goes out to a building and sees what it is, puts the information on a SIDS card. That goes to the battalion chief. He reviews it. If he wants more added, if he wants to change the verbiage, he can. Use common abbreviations because it is limited space to come over the computers. They're working on improving that now. But again, it goes up the chain of command, then it goes to a SIDS desk. If it is a really urgent that it be added immediately, the deputy chief can make a phone call and it goes immediately into. If it's something that is dangerous, it's a life safety issue, it can be immediately entered via the deputy chief.
That's wonderful. That's awesome.
All right, we're going to have to wrap things up, fellas. We'll start with Clark. Any closing comments? Any encouragement to our troops out there to become and remain students of the fire service, Clark?
Absolutely. We've said it before, and we can't say it enough. You're not going to learn what's in your first in by reading dispatch notes and by sitting in the fire station and thinking about what's going to go on. You have to drive around. You have to be brash. You have to be brazen. You can't be shy. You have to have the confidence in yourself and your company to walk up to a construction site, ask to see the supervisor, the superintendent, and ask him what's going on in this building. Most people are kind of nervous when the fire department shows up. A lot of fire caps say, "Oh, I don't want to disrupt the business," stuff like this. No, that's a bunch of BS. You walk up to that superintendent, you say, "What's going on in this building?" And if you have to ask for permits, and if you see anything that's out of line or inconsistent with what you know is right or illegal, you need to be able to address it right there. What's going on? Let me see the permits. I'm calling fire prevention right now. You have to be stern. This is our lives. This is the lives of our brother and the lives of the people we're enlisted to protect, the employees of this building who are going to get caught in this fire when something goes bad or else it collapses on these people. It is our duty to protect these people, and we can't be shy about getting around and putting the hammer down when we have to.
Clark, I see that there's at least on my department, there's a disconnect between fire prevention and fire suppression. When in fact, our number one job is to protect people from fire. The best way to do that is proactively before a fire occurs. If we're on a medical call and we see chains across the panic hardware in the back of a store, in a storeroom, we've got to take action right there and then, right now. those chains are coming off, and we're going back later in the day, and we're going to make sure that those chains are off, and then we're going to go back later and later, because chances are they'll put those chains back on.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we've got to be the sheriff in town. Daryl, any last thoughts? I'm getting a hashtag here. Multiple garbage recycling bins, multiple vehicles. Yes, Bill Carey. Yes, and in my estimation, my experience, a bunch of cars parked in the front yard. There's not enough driveway space. They'll just take the whole front yard and park their cars. So you're spot on with that, Bill. Daryl, any closing thoughts, sir?
Yeah, obviously there's a lot we can learn from the 23rd Street collapse. I kind of made a short list. I have a short list of fires for any viewers that want to review some of the historic fires. And I really think about what you just mentioned, a disconnect between fire prevention and suppression. And all of these fires really kind of showcase this. Please look up these fires if you're not familiar with any of them. There's been multiple books written about each one, but one is the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire. That was one of the worst tragedies. It actually helped form unions in this country. The Hartford Circus, which a lot of people are not familiar with. Our Lady of Angels. I was just back in Chicago and was talking to former Commissioner Hoff about this fire. The station fire, which is more recent, that nightclub fire, which killed many people. And one outside of this country, the Bradford City Stadium fire. That was a tragic soccer stadium fire. Look these up. We can learn from them, but these are some of the fires that caused the most loss of life in this country. And all, I think, did have a huge disconnect between fire prevention and suppression activities.
Thank you, Daryl, brother Daryl. Sam Hiddle, any closing thoughts, comments?
I was just, I was going to piggyback. I think what Clark said was outstanding. I mean, I'll go look at job sites on my day off. And if we have to come back on duty, we will. But that's the best time to see the construction. And then what Daryl said, I'd like to encourage people, just because that soccer stadium fire was outside of the United States, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're talking about the same event, they had actually just put a new police chief in on that, correct?
Yes, that is that same event.
Yes, he was unaware and unfamiliar with the potential.
Yeah.
So even though it's outside the country, the parallels are there.
All right, thank you. And hey, Sam, have a safe shift, brother. Okay.
Thank you.
And remember, take every glass, every spit of glass. Do us proud, okay, brother? And that's on medical calls.
Right.
All right, brother. Make us proud. All right, Jason, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just to kind of mirror what Clark and Sam said, but you do have to be a little bit courageous when you go into some of these buildings, I guess it is, especially residential buildings, EMS calls. We make a point to, with permission and kind of indiscreetly sometimes, but look at the basement layouts of those houses, especially in neighborhoods. If it's going on in that house, it's probably going on in that particular neighborhood, and it's laid out the same. And, we encourage our guys, and I did it when I was a captain. We'd stop at apartment complexes and knock on doors to see different things that were going on. Or if we saw a lot of movie vans or a lot of garbage containers, we would stop in those complexes. And you do have to kind of impose yourself on the management. And there were times we knocked on the doors of tenants and just asked, hey, we're wanting to get the layout of some of these floor plans. Do you mind if we take a look? They tell you no sometimes. They tell you yes sometimes. But it gave us, we found out that, some of the things we thought about those buildings, especially with the lower levels and the locked units in the basements, that we were able to get a better idea of what's going on in those places.
Oh, thanks, brother Jason. Thank you. Mike, Captain Mike?
Yeah, I would like to say, Bill, that renovations, and it's not just renovations, as everybody else said, it's conditions. What do you have in there? It could be what they've stored in there. There was lacquer stored at the 23rd Street fire. It could be that it's a hoarder home, and you went in, and that private dwelling is a hoarder home. Well, there have been instances recently where the floors have collapsed. The hoarder has been killed. But if we're going to go in there and we have water and we're putting it on this, we have to know what's going on. It's the old adage, if you see something, say something. If something is not normal, we should know it. If you see something going on, it doesn't look right, investigate, document, and pass the information on to the brothers and sisters. If you don't have the SID system, if you have, just as long as you get it in the thing. We also used to do reports that went out. You'd call the dispatcher and say, I have a box at 1 Main Street. I have a really unique building. I'm going to get, who would go on the first alarm and who would go on the second alarm? And you would write a notice on that building and address it to each and every one of those companies. Unusual building report. And they would look at it and they would know that if they go to 1 Main Street, the old movie theater is now turned into a supermarket. But there's a way to get up into the old balcony. They put a drop ceiling in. Don't be confused by it. Whatever it is, pass the knowledge on to the brothers and sisters.
And Mike, if you don't, and God forbid something happens, how are you going to feel the rest of your life, the rest of your career? Pass it on. Mike, those are words to the wise. All right, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank Key. That's keyhose.com. Again, you're never going to find a better product. And it's not just their combat ready, but they have other lines as well. Your department might not be able to afford the combat ready, but take a look at their others as well. They're all excellent products. I want to encourage everybody to get out of the station, look at your district, get busy. God bless you till next month. Stay safe. Till next month, this is Bill Gustin. Thanks for hanging out with us.